It's that time again. Time for some real talk about real issues to enhance your real life. Whatever you think, whatever you know, whatever you feel, Tanya doesn't mind talking about it. Get ready for some real talk that is always rated R, because Talk with Tanya has got to be relevant. Talk with Tanya has got to be refreshing. But most importantly, Talk with Tanya has got to be real. Tune in right now for Real Talk with Tanya White.
Hello, once again, welcome to another episode of the Real Talk with Tanya White show. I am your girl, Tanya White, and today, you know I always have fabulous guests, but today we have an even more fabulouser, yep, that's a word, fabulouser guest, and we're going to have some real talk about grief. We can never, ever talk enough about how to cope with grief, how to deal with grief, especially with us. Grief is unexpected. Death is unexpected, even though we expect it. Everybody's going to die. But when it comes to us, it's shocking. And shout out to all of my Jefferson County Public School, all the friends of DeJuan Wright, who recently passed. That was a blow to us. DeJuan was a vessel of love, light, support, innovation. He was God in like walking this earth because he loved everybody. And so to know that he is now in heaven, that is a shock, and we are dealing with it, whether you are a close friend, a colleague, a student, one of his staff, a family member. We are all shocked, and we're all going to be dealing with that as well. And we had another Louisville legend die 2 days after DeJuan, Junior Bridgman. Brilliant businessman, U of L legend. And so grief, our city, Louisville, Kentucky, is dealing with it. And we're dealing with it personally. So we're going to have some real talk about grief with a wonderful, wonderful person, Adrienne. She's going to pronounce her last name. Before I bring her on, we're going to say thank you to our sponsor. Real Talk sponsor this month is Derby City Medical Partners, LaTanya Renee Banks and her associates. Please, if you need a primary care physician, please go to Derby City Medical Partners. You're going to get the care that you need. You're going to be heard, and you're going to know that they take your illness, your concern seriously. Okay, Derby City Medical Partners. Go to them. LaTanya Renee Banks. Hey, you got to trust the name LaTanya Renee. Hey, we share the first and middle name, so I highly recommend her. All right, so let's bring on Adrienne. And she's going to tell us where she is, who she is, and we're going to have some real talk about grief. Welcome to the show, Adrienne.
Thank you, Tanya, for having me.
Can you say your last name for us?
Yes, it's Mikulka, Mikulka.
Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you so much for being on the show. Before we get into this real talk about grief, tell our audience who Adrienne is and how she became Adrienne Mikulka that we are going to hear today.
So it all started when I was 22 years old, and my best friend, her name is Paola Cirillo. She was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. We had just graduated college, and she asked me to come over, and she broke the news. We were born a day apart. We were soul sisters, born every year. It was the same, birthday traditions. We'd celebrate for 2 days straight for both of us. It was more like losing a sister than anything else. Mm-hmm. And I think that to jump in real deep very quickly, when you are bedside with somebody that you love who is passing, that experience changes you forever. And one of the things that I noticed while I was sitting with her at Sloan Kettering Memorial in Manhattan was that the family members that were around her couldn't really be with her passing. And we were doing the things that most people do, which, tell stories, laugh, share fond memories, try to keep it light. But I felt like there was no one addressing that the imminent death that was upon us. Like, she could be really scared, and I felt like I needed to be with her alone. So with the biggest balls I think I've ever had in my life, I asked her entire family to leave the room so that I could have a one-on-one conversation with her. And they actually agreed to it, which was really quite shocking. And during that conversation, I asked her if she was afraid, if there was anything she wanted me to do, like how we could support her. And through that very personal conversation, I just felt like there was the spirit of God was upon me, and I needed to be with her and her family in that way, and make sure that she got to say all the things that she needed to say. And so she asked if I could have everyone come in one at a time so that she could say her goodbyes. And it was a really beautiful thing. And it was the last time that she was conscious, was that evening. Next morning, she never woke up, and then she died 2 days later.
Woo! There's so much in that, Adrienne. First of all, thank you for having the biggest balls ever. Because when I hear you share that story, especially when it comes to blood relatives, sometimes in the midst of someone dying, we're so self-centered, and we're human, that we never ask the person who is dying, how are you feeling, first of all? And so you were so in tune with what was going on. Like you said, you are soul sisters, so you knew, okay? I have a soul sister myself. We share the same birthday. So, and yes, we both had the biggest balls when it comes. Sometimes you got to look.
Yeah.
Say, look. So Adrienne already feel your spirit. I love. Adrienne's a biggest ball carrier, okay? You need her on your team. And then in that moment, before we go to that, after that happened, first of all, were you shocked when they complied with your request?
I actually was. It took a lot of mustering the courage to actually ask. I probably sat with it for about an hour before I could have it come out of my mouth.
But hearing that, when they complied, that was what was needed in that moment. Then after that, you and your soul sister are sitting together. And even though you're there for her, I want you to talk about in that moment, this is, you did this for her, but what did you have to push through yourself to be the facilitator of her last wishes?
I don't even think that it was me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was just spirit working through me. I was just vocalizing what needed to be said, and who in their right mind is going to say no to the person who's passing, right? Like, so it's kind of like an easy ask. Once she gave me the permission to ask for her and facilitate that, it flowed in a way that was just natural.
So what I hear, Adrienne, for one, you had to be selfless. And in that moment of overwhelming grief, in that moment of you losing your soul sister, you're seeing her. And if you've never been by the bedside of somebody who is actively in their last stages of being on this earth, you cannot describe it. I was with my fiance right there. My mom, 5 months suffering from lung cancer. My dad, he just went to dialysis and then never came back. So that's a different experience. But being by the side of someone who is dying is indescribable, and it's experience that does awaken you. So now it's clear why you're so passionate about what we're going to talk about. Now, what was your friend's name again?
Paula.
In that moment, you and Paula, soul sisters, you're in the room together. Paula, I know there was a certain strength, because I've been there. This is like a certain strength that comes even in their dying, but you like, wow. How would you describe her in that moment, you and her together, and y'all get ready to do her last request?
She was just unapologetically direct.
Y'all hear that?
Yes,
that's my life language, by the way, Adrienne. Unapologetically, indirect.
Yes, she had there was no facade. There was no pretense. There was just straight up truth, exactly as she saw it, without any fear of judgment.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
How awesome would that be if we lived that life every day, every single day?
Mm-hmm.
Unapologetic directness, no facade, straight truth,
Mm-hmm.
without fear of judgment. I need y'all to rest in that. For nothing else that we're going to say, you need to rewind this and listen and practice living that, because it makes for a healthier, especially when you're over a certain age, like me, 50, and there are more years behind you than you have in front of you. I love that, Paula. So in the midst of Paula knowing that she only had limited time on the earth, I can imagine, I could feel it right now that she was grateful that you had the biggest balls to give her what she needed, and that she couldn't express to others, and others could not grasp, but you were able to grasp that. Now, because I'm trying to go through each section, because there's someone right now listening with someone suffering and going through their last stages of life on this earth. And when we're in that moment, if we're not in tune with the spirit, it could be chaos. And I say chaos in the fact because we don't know. We've never been in that situation before. Even though we may have had somebody else die, we've never been in that moment before. So there is a way that you can, it's like an out-of-body experience.
Yes.
Would you agree?
I would 100% agree with that.
Out-of-body experience. And you have to allow that. You have to lose your control, lose who you are to flow in the moment. So now every member of the family's coming in. Mm-hmm. You're sitting there as a facilitator of Paula's request. No judgment. You're just facilitating. And Paula, you said unapologetic directness. Mm-hmm. Was this your sister? Like, oh my God, we've seen it before, but never at this level. Is that what was you thinking at the time when everybody's coming in and she's telling the truth?
Well, it was just, they were very private conversations. The door was closed for each person. So I just was standing outside the door and making sure that everybody knew that they were, if they were next, or like, hey, if you needed to go get a cup of coffee, it'll be like 5-10 minutes, just sort of making sure that there wasn't downtime and that she got to see everybody and that it wasn't taking too long for, I didn't want each person to take an hour because, she was tired. She was exhausted. She doesn't have that time. So I think that she was really, people didn't spend more than probably 3 to 5 minutes, like was max.
So they were really out of themselves too, because I know how family can get.
Yes.
Especially when you think you're the person's favorite. But would you say that was a moment where the spirit was flowing and everyone was really in tune to what Paula wanted as they dealing with their... And so that is a very unique, that has to be, I'm going to put on my school counseling hat, Adrienne. Listen, my audience knows I'm a school counselor and I'll go back into those moments, especially when it's talking about grief. But you have to put on that hat and say that, hey, this was a moment that it was synchronicity. Just total synchronicity.
Yes.
For Paula.
Yes. For
Paula and closure.
Yes.
And so I want my audience to know that is possible. We don't have to, when people are at their last stages of life, and we know it, it doesn't have to be a chaotic, selfish, bickering type of thing. That's why I'm here. First of all, somebody needs to stand up and facilitate that. That was you, Adrienne.
Yes.
Be in tune with what the needs of the person who are at the last stage of death are, because it is there. It is their moment. It has nothing to do with us. Our moment will come after the person is gone. But in that moment, it's all about the person, all about what they want. Paula, thank you for showing unapologetic directness, no facade, straight up truth.
Yes.
I want people to get to know that. Now, Adrienne, now this is where we're going to get to now, because my mom did that same thing. It was like a day she was here. She was still in the hospital and she was unconscious. So she was not that person anymore until she passed. So now you're going through this, everything's done. But then when your best friend, your soul sister, is no longer can communicate, now it's when your grieving can start. Am I on it?
I think that you're in shock still, there's a numbness, so you're not really in grief yet. You're going to go through this phase of just like a loss of time and a loss of reality. So time just doesn't feel real as you're spending hours with them in this hospital room. You don't see the sun rising and setting. You really have no sense of how much time you're sitting there. You have no sense of movement going forward. It's like life has paused in that moment and you're just waiting. And inside of the waiting, there's a numbness that you can't, you're not really crying yet. You're not wailing, you're just in this space of pause. And I think that acknowledging that for the people who are about to lose someone that they care about is important, because I think what happens is, she was in a coma for a day and a half. And she waited for all of us to be out of the room before she took her last breath. And the nurse said, she opened her eyes, she sat up, she looked around the room, saw that no one was there, laid down, and took her last breath. And then we came back into the room, and the nurse told us that she had passed. And like literally, it was moments that we were like, everybody was like, I'm going to get a coffee. Do you want one? Stretching, kind of like, that sort of situation. And it was unreal to me that when the nurse told me, she sat up, opened her eyes, and checked out to make sure that she was not going to do this in front of anybody. It's just shocking how much control I think that we might actually have over the way that we pass and when we pass, and what our wishes are for those final moments. The strangest thing for me was walking back in and knowing before the nurse said it, because I couldn't feel her energy. So it was like walking into an empty room and you just didn't, like, I couldn't process fast enough. Like I just felt it. Like it was like the spirit was gone, and she looked rubber. It was the weird to see somebody's body after knowing them so intimately and know that they are not there. That is not them, and they are not there, and that's just a nice little rubber suit that their soul got to walk around in. It's like, it's visceral. Like I can't really explain it. Unless you've had the experience, you just can't. Like, yeah.
Whew. First of all, we may have some tears because it's so real.
Yeah.
It's to the point where you said she waited to make sure everyone was gone. That is, and I love what you said. You never know how much strength someone has until when and my audience knows this. I shared this story about my fiance. I had just moved to Indianapolis. We was going to start a life together. He had been, in remission with prostate cancer for years. And, things were going well. He had to go back to doctor. But when I finally moved, we dated for 16 months. And that week, when I finally, we was, girl, gonna get married. They said, it had come back inoperable, and he had called hospice. 6 weeks later, he had died, but to the point where it was that day, and you know that something, you know that you just know, and it's, you can't describe it. But I came home from work. The dog Darla was in there with us. He couldn't, it was hard for him to speak that day. Literally just laid in the bed and didn't have verbal communication, but we had communication. So I had literally gone, he mustered up to her and said, sweetie, can you give me some water? Went to the kitchen, got some water, less than 2-3 minutes. And he had gone. And I was like, he was such a gentleman. He didn't want me in there when he passed. So when you described that, Paula didn't want anybody in there when she took her last breath.
Yeah.
That is real, you guys. And I to this day, when I speak about my grief and dealing with just seeing him and my mom's grief, my mom was in the hospital, and they said the nurses and said she fought to the end. I was like, oh, okay. And that gave me a peace to know that even though her body wasn't able to, because my dad had passed years before, she wanted to fight and let us know that she was fighting her children, and she fought to the end. So knowing that and hearing that power, that first of all, I could visualize it. She's sitting up, looking around, and said, "Okay, this is my time." And then you describe when you walk in and didn't feel the spirit. I felt that because it's indescribable, you guys. I'm telling you, unless you've been in there, it is a feeling that you can't describe, but it's like it pushes you to another level of passion. And that's where we're going to get to, Adrienne, about why you are talking about the subject of grief. Now, in that moment when you felt your soul sister was no longer there, describe because now you're still here, you're ready to deal with what you're getting ready to deal with. You said, there's a numbness. There was numbness until you know it's happening, but it's like there is no time. You don't even know what day it is. You just know that this is what you're supposed to do. So after that, Adrienne, and you all you said
22.
In your 20s?
22.
First of all, Adrienne, to go through that 22, you after college, this is our life. Did you ever think for a moment, this is not fair?
Of course. Of course.
Y'all, oh my God. So let's take us from there to where you start saying, hey, I need to share my grief talk with people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long winding road, and at the time it was it was the year 2000. And at that time,
that year, if you were not born in 2000, it was a lot going on.
Yeah.
In the year 2000, they think the pandemic is something. No, 2000 was crazy. Yeah. For real, in the atmosphere.
Yeah. And so I feel like at the time, grief, I couldn't find places that were talking about grief. And I couldn't find, at 22, I grew up in what inside of the grief language, is a closed household where we don't talk about grief. We don't talk about your feelings like that. You just get through it. You don't have to emote, or, you're not going to talk about it with each other. Maybe on an anniversary, you might say, oh, I really missed my grandma, or you might say, I really miss so-and-so, but that's it. You might go to mass and have a mass said for them, but that's it. Right. So it's a very closed household, the opposite, obviously, being an open, learning about that open households actually exist was jaw dropping to me, that there are households where people really do engage their grief in very healthy ways with their family members. And I was like, really? Where are these people?
Yeah. Where are they?
Yeah. And how did they learn to do that? but it was a struggle for me. There are many years that I just avoided my grief and avoided dealing with it, and the only way that it was coming out was through art. And I thought that it was like a distraction for me. The way that I was looking at it was not that me making art about it was healthy. It was just like it had to come out somehow, and this was the only way I felt like I could. And so it just, I made a film about her passing. I even like created animated characters that looked like us, and like did like a little animation of her like wandering through the woods, after she passed. And I just made a lot of work, and all of it centered around missing my best friend or dealing with what happened, processing the actual stages. Like when I was filming the short movie that I made about her passing, and I was talking to the actress who was playing her, and I was talking to the actress that was playing me, and I was explaining the scene. I actually had them recreate our final conversation. And watching that play out in front of me and directing, there was a lot of healing in that.
Yes.
A lot of healing in telling the story. Life throws you lots of lemons, and I've had several lemons. I've had, there's not only, losing my best friends, but I had an engagement breakup as well under very dire circumstances. He did not pass away, but it was the death of a relationship that I thought was my future. I've had several miscarriages. I had to unfortunately make a decision to have an abortion at one point in time. That always weighed very heavily. And that's a grief that I feel like nobody really talks about that.
No.
And we really need to, like the politics of abortion overshadow the humanity of what women are dealing with.
Yes. Even when they have to make that choice during the process and the after. You have hit on something. You coming back, because that is a silent shame that it's a grief, but because of the politics around abortion, who is talking about the feelings that woman goes through? Now, even I dare say the father who goes through it. And so that is definitely that you talking about that closed mouth. Yes. And so I want to, first of all, when you described making the film, that is another level of strength. You said you told them recreate our last conversation, and you're looking at this. Is that another out of body experience that you was going through?
Absolutely. But it was like I had to, like I've been studying under a man named Alan Wolfelt, Wolfelt. He is in Colorado, splits his time between Colorado and Arizona. And I've learned so much from him. And he's really been integral on my journey of becoming a grief doula and hosting the kind of gatherings that I host for women, for mostly, actually, it's all women. I never have men come to my events, and it's not like I say don't come. It's
they just haven't gotten the permission from society to, first of all, feel right. Talk about their grief.
Well, we'll talk about that just a little, because I learned a little bit about that too. But so just jumping back, I learned something from him that I didn't know at the time, that you have to go backward in order to go forward. In your grief, you have to go backward. You have to tell the story. You have to go through reliving it and seeing it from different perspectives at different parts of your life, so that you can keep moving forward and allowing the grief to become growth.
No,
that's the
Adrienne. That was, y'all heard that? I felt that spirit. You have to go backward and allow the grief to become growth.
Yes. Yeah.
Grief to become growth.
It's painful, but you have to do it. You have to go back. You have to tell the story. And that's why, even with Paula, every time I have to say, My best friend died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma when we were 22. I have to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it doesn't allow the growth to occur, the moving forward, right? It's like dealing with that reality and then going, and now it's time. Now we have an opening space, right? There's nothing covered. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing unsaid. It's about not allowing anything to be in the unspoken.
Wow. First of all, you just said that little phrase, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna talk about that. A grief doula. And then now your language is aligning up with that, allowing the grief to become growth, because a doula is explain that, because I want you to explain in your own word. What is a grief doula?
Right. So we all know what a birth doula is, right?
Yes.
It's a woman who assists, usually a midwife, sometimes a doctor, in your birth. And they are on your side. They're on your team as the birthing mother. And they're there to advocate for you and make sure that you have everything that you need. Because the midwife and the doctor, while they are caring for you, it's their job to make sure that the baby has everything that it needs. So you are the person who is, standing for the health and well-being and experience of the mother as the doula in a birthing situation. Inside of a grieving situation, you might have even heard of a death doula. A death doula is someone who is standing by the person's side that is dying. And there are sometimes family death doulas. They'll stand by the side of the family if, like, let's say the person who's dying has Alzheimer's and they need more support. Right. So a grief doula is someone who is holding the hand and companioning someone through their grief. So they aren't a grief counselor, right? They can't analyze you and, give you like steps to, why you feel this way. They're not going to bring in all of the therapeutic stuff. It's about being trained to listen for what someone needs and what it is that's going to follow their path. Because all grief is different and everyone's experience is different. And so it's just about.
And it's okay for it to be different, even if you are in the same family. You all are going to experience the grief differently. And that is okay.
Yes.
I love grief doula, because grief to become growth. Because sometimes when we hear grief, it's just for us to sit in the grief, to cope with it, to just recreate the moments that they're not here, but not grow from it. Right. Grief is growth. If y'all get nothing else, this is a nugget number 2. Grief is growth. And you're trying to grow with the spirit of what that person taught you, but not sit in the sadness of them not being here. That's why I hear you say a grief doula, grief to become growth. And you have to talk about it, you guys. You have to say it. I heard you say you have to say it every time. Just like when you are in a recovery, you have to acknowledge why you're there and what you want to get. And that's what I heard you say. Acknowledge. And by acknowledgement, you got to say it. Adrienne, first of all, thank you. Because grief is not, first of all, easy to talk about and then easy to teach others to. We usually say cope with grief. Now I'm gonna stop saying that. We're gonna grow through grief, because that's the purpose, right? Yeah.
Well, so I'm gonna give you another little distinction, which is, so grief is actually the pain of the love that's stuck in your body, right? That's what grief actually is. It's unexpressed love, because what happens is you love this thing. It could be a person. It could be a future that you created. It could be a pet. It could be a business idea that you had. But there's something that you are attached to, and you're feeding it with love, right? Your love is pouring out of your energy from you to them, or that idea. And then when that stops, the love doesn't have anywhere to go. And so you're holding it in your heart. And that's what the pain is, that the love is not being expressed. And so the grief is actually the inside feelings of the pain of not allowing that love to leave. And the word mourning is what we tend to collapse grief and mourning, but mourning is actually the actions that we take to have the grief come out, to express it into the world itself. And so inside of, taking your grief and bringing, and so the thing that I say all the time for my gatherings is we're mourning on purpose. Like we're creating time and a space for us to mourn on purpose. So
because we don't allow that. We don't allow that in society.
No.
Look, after the funeral, I tell you, people say, okay, now it's time for you to get over it. No. So I love it. Mourning on purpose.
Yeah. Mourning on purpose.
Now,
you have to create a moment.
Before you could, create a space for others to do that. How did you create a space for you to understand that grief was growth, mourning on purpose? Because that is a whole process in itself, isn't it, Adrienne? I'm just saying.
Absolutely. But that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why it was a long process. Because like, for me, it was like every time something horrible was happening, like whether it was the breakup of my engagement or the decision to have the abortion or the miscarriages, or every time these things would happen, my uncle passing away, my grandparents passing away, like all of these things, you feel bombarded, right? Because you're not processing the grief and you're holding it in ways. And so then it just starts to become compounded grief. And compounded grief just makes you feel exhausted and overwhelmed, and you can get depressed and have anxiety and it's all because you're avoiding the processing of the grief. And so for me, it would get like, I would hold. And then I would like be so full that I would vomit, and my vomiting would look like art making. Like I would have like a 3-day like purge, and I would just make work about all the things I was really upset about. And then I would hold, and I'd throw it up again, right? So it would be like 2 or 3 times a year, this would happen. I was really good at holding. It was like really good, like for a good 4 or 5 months, I'd really hold on to it really tight, not let anything happen. And, it shows up differently for a lot of people. But for me, it looked like staying busy.
Boom, staying busy. But you said the key word, compounded grief is the act of avoiding.
Yep.
And that's what we've been taught in society. Yep. And so when you get with Adrienne, and a lot of you are going to get with Adrienne because she is talking a new language of freedom, liberation, of you growing through your grief. It's grief. Let me go back to that. Grief is unexpressed love of the pain that's left in your body. Grief is love.
It is.
Grief is love, but we need to know how to express that love in healthy ways. And Adrienne, your new grief doula that you're going to reach out to and get help is going to help you do that and more intentionally. Before we go to your grief gatherings, Adrienne, give my audience how they can connect with you. Oh my God. I'm already saying, look, I have to have you as a virtual guest for my students.
Thank you. So I have a website called arthealsgrief.com.
Arthealsgrief.com. That's easy to remember.
Very easy to remember. Arthealsgrief.com. I'm on Instagram also as arthealsgrief.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn just as my name, Adrienne John Mikulka. And I post a lot of articles and things that you can, I'll talk like just recently, the holiday season, right? Mm-hmm. People have a lot of grief come up. A word that I learned from Alan Wolfelt that I never had a word for before. It's called a grief burst. It gave me so much power to know what it was. I had never heard that word before. It gave me so much freedom to just know that I was normal when certain times of the year would come around and I would have these bursts, and I would always feel like, oh, I must not have grieved right yet. I must not have, because I'm not over it, right? Like I still had that idea, like you get over it. And it's not something that you ever get over. No. You grow and you will always love them and you will always miss them. But it's normal for you to have a grief burst, especially at times of the year where you would have been with them, right?
Yes.
And so, so the grief burst is it. So what he has taught me is that when you have a grief burst, the best thing to do is share it with somebody, a confidant that knew the other person or that you really trust, who can just listen and hear. Like there's nothing wrong not to do anything with it. Just have them hold the bucket so that you can go, guess what happened today? I was listening to the Z100 in the car and I heard this song and all of a sudden tears streaming down my face. I was on the same street that Powell and I drove to go pick up our, her wig before she passed away, yada, yada. And I just started crying. right? And so that's the kind of moment that you have it, and then it goes away, and it's the release. It's the release of like what you need to let go of at that moment. And it's also a bit of the love being able to be expressed, right?
Absolutely. Because you gave us new language.
Yeah.
You don't get over someone's death because you are forever loving them, expressing the love. When you see grief as unexpressed love and releasing the pain in your body, you can stop saying, oh, I should have been over this. Nope.
Right.
Love is everlasting.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start looking at that, Adrienne, you have helped me. Grief is unexpressed love. And
Mm-hmm.
so you having grief burst, thank you for that new language.
Yes.
Grief burst is when, and it does when anniversaries happen. And listen, when I go back to Indianapolis and I'm like, oh, that's where we had our first date. That's where he took me to show. That's a grief burst, and it's okay. That is an expression of love in a moment that you are reliving a happy thought.
Mm-hmm. That's the going backward. That's the going backward to go forward.
Yes. And so you can grow through your grief. Now, Adrienne, look, it's supposed to only be 30 minutes. We have 41 minutes. And that's because you are giving us new language. This is real talk about grief. Yeah. And I love it. And you will be back. We're going to do a live version for people to come and have their live questions because I love this. This is new language that we have not heard. I haven't heard it. And I've been studying grief ever since my mom died. And I was like, okay, I have to share this with somebody. So this is even newer language since 2005. And so I love it. Again, go to arthealsgrief.com. Get with Adrienne. If you are an organization. Now, let's talk about these grief gatherings.
Yes.
Now, Nicole told me about that. That's what sparked. I was like, what? What is this, Adrienne? A grief gathering?
Yeah. So I have to say that this is completely inspired by the Spirit Weavers gatherings in Oregon. I don't know if you are familiar with the Spirit Weavers, but I have attended a few of their sessions over the years, and I always found them to be extremely healing. And during these events, they have a host of artists and experts in all different fields. And then, you're camping outside, no technology, and you just go to each one of these events and you explore whatever that person's specialty is. And I happened to be in the presence of an incredible woman named Rhythm. And she was a grief doula, and she was just amazing. And there was another woman that was there, and she did a poetry workshop that has completely inspired me and taken life inside of my own practice to use poetry as another form of expression. And so these gatherings, because I can't do it on a large scale like that, I don't have like 15 acres to host hundreds of people. Yeah. I was like, how can I bring this home? How can I bring this to people? And so people will host a gathering in their home. So for instance, one of my good friends, Jackie, she's another best friend of mine, beautiful soul, a soul sister I got to meet later in life, which is very uncommon. Yeah. And so Jackie lost her father, and there were a few other compounded grief situations happening. And she has a strong group of women around her. And she was just like, can you host one of these gatherings for us? And so it's sort of, somersaulted off of that. And so now I do these grief gatherings whenever I'm requested. It's really a word of mouth thing. Yeah. I don't really advertise it because I do have a full-time job like you. I work for the Department of Education, and I'm a high school teacher.
Oh, listen, this is why I feel you, Adrienne. You are an educator at heart.
Yes, yes. So as a high school teacher, I'm very packed full. So this can only really happen like maybe once or twice a month, if that.
But there's a lot of emotion, and people don't understand when you are the facilitator of something, before it even happens, a grief gathering, you are taking on the energies that you don't even know that are coming, but you're preparing to to be a liberator, to be an educator, to be that listening ear. And so that's a lot emotional sacrifice and then energy that you have to give. So I totally understand. Oh, Adrienne, we're going to be sisters. You got to come talk about the education.
Absolutely.
Yes. But I love, first of all, you have to be a conduit of change and new information to say, hey, I've gone to a Spirit Weavers event. How do I pack up my experience and give it to someone else? That takes a heart of passion. And so I thank you for that. And having these grief gatherings and word of mouth. Yes, it's word of mouth. It's going to get bigger because you're on the Real Talk with Tanya White show. And Tanya White is going to be telling people to go to arthealsgrief.com and get Adrienne for their show, their event. She's a grief doula. That's new language. They're going to be a grief doula. Absolutely. So Adrienne, so tell us about how long have you been doing these grief gatherings?
Since 2019.
Oh, before the pandemic, you didn't even know what you were doing.
No, I didn't even realize. But when we were in the pandemic, there's a website called I think it's called letsreimagine.org. And they are a very powerful source and were a huge resource over the pandemic because all of my workshops went online and they gave a format for people to find online workshops to deal with their grief over the pandemic. And so that was they were very integral because I got to sit there and go, okay, what do I want to do this week? And I hosted several online events that have turned into in-person events. And like one of my favorite ones to do is called Chat and Chew at the Checkered Cloth. And I have a regular picnic blanket and we go to somebody's house and everybody comes potluck style with a dish that represents a relationship of somebody that they lost. And we all come and we have photocopies of the recipes and everybody leaves with all the recipes and we munch down and everybody gets to talk about the person that they loved and like when you would eat this item with them or, did they teach you how to make it or, all the memories that circulate around that food item. And so it's one of my favorites because it feels so, you can bring a group of strangers together and within an hour, you're trying their foods, you're talking about people you love, everybody has a picture of the person. We have like a table off to the side where we put all the pictures of their loved ones up so that everybody knows, this is my person. And and we talk and we eat and it's so healing and community matters. You can't heal in isolation. You have to heal in community. It's so important. That's why the gathering thing I was alone when I was dealing with so much grief, and going to the Spirit Weavers gathering was like, it was transformational to me. Having that space where I was coming together with like-minded women. Again, it was a space full of women. And I do want to just jump to that because this is really important. So I learned this from a book called How Men Grieve, and I can't remember the name of the author. But I would recommend this book for any woman who's in a relationship with a man where you've lost someone together, maybe a child together, or maybe his parent has passed and you are grieving one way and he is grieving another way. This book really delineates like how people who are testosterone heavy in their body, how they are processing in a much different way than the estrogen heavy people.
Yes.
And I say this because, a lot of people don't recognize that as we nearing 50, those people who have...
I'm in it, Adrienne, 4 years.
Yeah. Those people who are in that, us estrogen heavy people are transitioning into becoming testosterone heavy people because as we lose our menstruation, as we lose all of that, we now have an overabundance of testosterone in our bodies and an underabundance of estrogen. And our brain actually starts to change, and we actually start thinking the way that men have been thinking all along. But men have the opposite. They start having more estrogen in their body and less testosterone. So it's like we flip, right?
It's like a Freaky Friday moment, isn't it?
It is. And so it's important to delineate that the testosterone heavy people do grieve in a specific way, and it's more action oriented. It's less talking. So as women will age and they lose their estrogen, we will be less interested in having conversations about it and more interested in having the activity. And so when this is actually something that was a bone of contention between Paula's parents. I witnessed a lot of, because I grew up with them, so they were like my parents, and so I witnessed a lot of shifting and pain happening, and the statistics of parents who stay together after they've lost a child is actually very low.
Yeah,
and a large part of that has to do with the inability for each other to understand what the other's going through. And I felt like that this book, The Way Men Heal, on Amazon, don't know who the guy, I can't remember the guy's name. I'll have to get it for you later.
The Way Men Heal. Okay, y'all get that.
How men,
look it up.
Yeah, How Men Heal. How Men Heal. I have to look. Or The Way Men Heal. It's either How Men Heal or The Way Men Heal. It's very thin. On the cover, there's a guitar and a basketball and like things like that, right? And it really talks about...
Adrienne, I'm trying to look it up right now.
Yeah, and so...
That's why you keep seeing me look down.
Yeah, so it's all action-oriented. In the past, when one of our family members would die, it would be the men's job to dig the hole to bury them. It would be their job to build the casket. They, of course, and we still do this, carry the casket, some people, to the cemetery. The burying, the shoveling, they would, like, the men of the family would handle all of those physical things. And that was a huge part of their grief processing that we in Western culture have taken away from the process. And so now men are, if they've lost a child and their wife is suffering and needs to talk all the time and she needs to emote all the time, that's his processing is so not that. And it makes the woman feel like disconnected from her husband. Like, how can you not be feeling these things? They're just going to be dealing with it in a much different way. There's a story inside of that book about, I
found it, by the way. It's The Way Men Heal, Tom Golden.
That's his name.
LCSW, a licensed social worker. And it does a guitar, basketball. Yes.
That's the one. That's the book. And he talks about, I don't remember names ever. And it's like a really super, is it Michael Jordan who lost his dad and he went from, yes. Okay. So
in the height of his career.
Yes.
I remember that.
Yes. And in the book, it talks about that was his grieving because his dad loved baseball and always wanted him to be a baseball player. So part of his healing process was that he was to play baseball while he grieved his father's loss.
And nobody understood because he left basketball at the height and then went to baseball. He wasn't as good. And now we understand he was doing it as a celebration. What you say, Adrienne? Grief is unexpressed love and pain. He was expressing his love. But that's a whole... Adrienne, you've got to be back. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh now, and that's why we have to understand people and not be so quick to judge their action. Because when you were describing that, every funeral, family funeral, the men, first of all, they will be responsible for the food because they love, that's how they express, cook, grill. They will all be outside. Now they will come and they will be like the security. This is in my, but they will make sure everybody's okay. If somebody really had a major breakdown, they would be the ones to come in and console. But when you're describing that, yes, that was their quote unquote job. And it was their job because that's how they healed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They would be the drivers.
Yep.
If somebody need a driver, if somebody, whatever need, they would go to the store, they would go, action.
Yeah. And so like if you have a sibling, let's say you have a brother and your parents die and he wants to clean out the house and fix the fence and just get it on the market already and get it going. And you, as the female of the sibling, want to go through the clothing and maybe make a quilt out of it. So you want to pick your things, or you want to go through the pictures and talk about it and spend more time in the house and all those things so that you can say your goodbyes. You're both saying goodbyes differently, but I've seen so many siblings fighting where the sister will be like, I can't believe my brother, he just wants to get rid of it all, and they don't understand that that's his grief, that's his process. Right.
Big ups to my brother, Joe White, and my sister. Not, yes, you have just described. And that was the initial stage because, first of all, we didn't know how to grieve, especially after our mother died. When our dad died, she was there. She was a buffer. Okay. But after mama died, we called ourselves orphans. We was like, how do we live life? And that because we didn't have permission to grieve. We didn't have the language. We didn't understand this. And many people didn't understand. My brother, especially at my mother's funeral, yeah, he loved mama. He's, mama's boy, but he did not want to sit close to. No, we understood that. We understood that as a siblings. A lot of family didn't understand that, and so we was like, look, leave him alone. And so they do. The Way Men Heal, Tom Golden, get that book.
Yes.
We probably have a discussion on that, and so that is so enlightening, Adrienne. For first of all, now I know. You're an educator, so you're always a lifelong learner.
Yes.
Before you do anything, you're probably researching and listen, that's me.
Yep.
Because I gotta know, I gotta experience it. And then I can teach it, just like a teacher. You have to experience the lesson or you can teach it. And so, Adrienne, we are almost an hour in, and this doesn't feel like it. Oh my God. Now you are going to be Real Talk with Tanya White's Grief Doula.
Oh, thank you.
No. We talk about grief a lot because, from one, I've been through it, and I know that it's a taboo. Now, I used to say we're going to cope and how to handle grief. No, we're going to grow through grief. Adrienne has taught us, given us new language to do it. And you have so much else to share. We got to talk about grief and people who have abortions. We got to talk about grief. And
I would love to do that. We should do a special just about abortions because it's not talked about. Not talked about. And honestly, so Alan Wolfelt, that guy that I'm studying under, his website's also amazing. And Center for Loss. It's Center for Loss. I believe it's a .org. I don't think it's a .com, but I could be wrong. His name is Alan Wolfelt. If you just do a search for his name, it'll come up. He's written so many books, and they're so beautiful. His books. They're so personal. And even when I was searching, he doesn't have a book about abortion. And I was like, I couldn't find, and it's really one of those things, and nobody's talking about that. And
Adrienne, you just got to write the book. Okay.
I know I have
from
to
this publisher right here. You got to write the book, okay? Because you can't find it. So
can't find it.
God is telling you, Adrienne, write it.
Yeah,
right. What you can't find, because that is so true. I have many friends, and and we don't talk about. We all know at least 4 or 5 people who have gone through that abortion for whatever.
Yep.
But after it's done, it's never talked about ever again.
Nope.
And they're going through a lot of emotions.
Yep.
So Adrienne, look, you're listen, I have crowned you Real Talk with Tanya White's Grief Doula. And so you all will be seeing Adrienne Mikulka on here, and we're going to talk about grief. Real talk about grief. She's given us real talk about grief. Okay? New language she has given us. arthealsgrief.com. Now let's lighten this up before we leave. Sure. I always have a segment, 5 fun facts, okay? I don't know what's going to come out my head. And then after that, we're going to give your contact information again and what's next. So, Adrienne, what is your favorite movie to watch over and over again that you can recite?
I love the movie Amélie.
Okay.
You know the French movie Amélie?
I know. I haven't heard
of it. Fabulous Adventures of Amélie Poulain. You should watch it.
Okay.
I love that.
Does your family get oh, why are you watching this again?
Well, I always watch it when I have my period and I'm in my bed quiet.
Well, that's your movie, okay?
It's your movie.
Oh my God. Listen, Your favorite place to a vacation when you do have a vacation?
It's not about, it's not about the place. It's about the people. I love taking my daughters on adventures. I have 2 daughters and I love they came with me to the Spirit Weavers gathering. They came with me. I bring them everywhere. If I can possibly, they're starting to resent it a little bit. They're, teenagers. They're like, we don't want to go. And I'm like, no,
keep doing it. They will understand it better by and by. They will listen. They will understand it. Yeah. Celebrity crush, Adrienne. We all have them.
Oh my goodness. Oh, celebrity crush. I would have to say it was definitely Christian Slater growing up. Absolutely adored Christian Slater.
You have him in your locker, and
I had him on my wall. I had him in my wallet.
Did you do Mrs. Slater? Mrs. Slater, Adrienne Slater.
Who didn't do that? Who didn't do that? Yeah, and he was like only 2 degrees of separation because I actually knew somebody who was on a movie set with him once, and I was like, oh. Yeah, I was almost like, can you bring me to the set? Can I meet him? Like, what's going on?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. All right. What are your favorite snack to eat when you're watching your favorite movie?
Honestly, grapes with Gouda.
Ooh, I've never tried grapes with Gouda.
I love it. I get that big hunk with the rind that's like the wax rind that's red, and I just have a knife, and it's very like satisfying to like knife into like a big cheese and eat
grapes with Gouda.
I like it.
New snack, y'all. I'm gonna go get that.
Really yummy.
It's healthy. Like,
yeah, it's really good.
Grapes with Gouda. Now, if you could talk to anybody that you admire, living or dead, and get like an hour of power for where you are now to take you to the next level, who would that be?
That's a great question. Oh, who would, honestly, it would be my great grandmother times 14.
The grandmother wisdom is so good, especially when you in the 50 club. That's why they acted that way. They didn't have time. They had lived their life. And I love what you said. You let me know. At 50, you get more testosterone. That's what
it's starting.
Why you act like it? Listen, and then the whole menopause. Listen, it's a whole nother life.
Grief too. That's grief too. That's a grief. There's 3 griefs right there that we're talking about. First of all, there's the grief of having children. Nobody really talks about the grief of having children.
Yes.
There's the grief of them getting older. Who talks about empty nest
syndrome?
Right. And then we've got the grief of menopause. Like that, you lose your body, you lose your identity, you lose
the hot flashes alone is
I know
real.
It's crazy.
Ridiculous.
It is. It is.
Why is everybody not burning up? They're like, oh, it's so cold. I'm like, I'm burning up in here. Yeah. I'm gonna turn on the air. And they're like, oh my God, here she goes again. That is so true. So grandmother wisdom is like none other. And I understand it now. I understand it. Adrienne, you have been amazing, phenomenal, fabulous. We real talk about grief is what we've had today. I've learned so much, but let me wrap it up. Real talk. If you just joined us, you first of all re-listen to this. Grief is about growth. All right. Grief is about growth. It's unexpressed love. And how you deal with it as you're trying to release the pain out of your body. But it's really grief is love. Love. All right. Mourning is the actions that we take from grief, and it can be intentional. Okay. If you can't get Adrienne, make mourning intentional for you to grow through grief. And then so much compounded grief is shown when you start avoiding things. Okay. It's okay to have grief births, especially during holidays, birthdays. Now I understand, like when I go past certain places, what I'm having, the language. You've given us new language, and you cannot, if you can't heal in isolation. You have to have a community that is talking about it, and it's okay to talk about it. And go to arthealsgrief.com. Adrienne, what's next for you?
Well, I have 7 more years until I retire.
Oh, wow. First of all, they're going to fly by.
And so for me, like, I would love to be somebody who's doing the kind of spirit weaver gathering sized events, because to me, there's like so much power in having like a smorgasbord of like art happening, so that you can just keep going and taste testing and seeing what works for you, what doesn't work for you, like a moment of exploration. To me, it's like you get out of your head, get out of your home, I would if anybody wants to just donate 50 acres to me in some really beautiful place where we could have campgrounds, let's do that. Let's do it. Let's do
Somebody's listening, or somebody knows, talking about that 2 degrees of separation. Somebody knows somebody sitting with 50 acres right now and trying to figure out what to do. Donate it to Adrienne Mikulka. She's got stuff to do. And maybe then she can retire early. Okay.
I wouldn't do that to my kids. I wouldn't do that to my kids. I couldn't do that. We love them. We just love them.
We're the heart of educators, okay?
We just love them. We can't do that to them. And speaking about being an educator, you should look at my Instagram page, my LinkedIn page, because I just did an article about the seniors who are graduating and are getting rejection letters from college.
Oh my God.
Parents really need to understand, like, that's some serious grief. When they had this idea that they were going to go to this college and they get that rejection letter, dude, this is not light. This is not like, well, let's just go pick another college.
No,
there's some heavy stuff happening there.
Especially, it's so much now. And see, we didn't have social media and all that to, but dealing with that, dealing with all the changes, dealing with all the expectations, just it's so much to deal that we don't understand because we didn't go through it. Yeah. But it's a lot of grief that they experience daily. Yeah. And so, yes. We will go. What's your LinkedIn page?
It's just Adrienne John Mikulka.
Okay. Adrienne John Mikulka. Get with her. Adrienne, listen, we're going to talk offline because you will be back.
Thank you.
Real Talk with Tanya White. Please connect with Adrienne at Art Heals. No, let me see.
That's right.
ArtHealsFree.com. Get with her. Create some events. Collaborate, because she's giving us new language, and that's what Real Talk's like. We love new language so we can not only deal but heal through whether it's grief, whether it's loss of a job, which is another thing of grief, empty nest syndrome, everything, real life issues we talk about. On here. And so get with Adrienne, rewind this, share this episode with people especially Louisville. We experienced a major grief. DeJuan Wright, one of JCPS public schools principal, everyone's advocate. He was with the teachers. He just, y'all, we experienced grief. There's a loss, an unexpected loss of him. And now we're all grieving, whether you're family, whether you're co-workers. It's like, what do we do now? Also, we lost Louisville legend, Junior Bridgman. Everything that we've learned about business in the city of Louisville that can do spirit. So we lost two legends, and then dealing with our own family grief. There's a lot of grief on my social media. So listen to this, share this. Adrienne's available, arthealsgrief.com. This was wonderful. And again, Real Talk, you know what I say after every episode. Before I say it, I gotta say, get with Derby City Medical Partners, our sponsor, if you need primary health care. If you want to be a sponsor of the Real Talk with Tanya White show, you know where to reach me. Real Talk with Tanya White at gmail.com, 502-509-6053. We love sponsorships. And then also, coming up, it is Derby time. Everything's Derby. So in April, you're going to hear, we're going to have guests on about Derby, what's going on. So get with that. But until this next episode, re-listen to this. Adrienne is going to be your new grief doula. Reach out to her. And remember to love your life, live your life, laugh through your life. Until next